Some
Are
people
you
vanish
afraid
without a
of the
trace.
dark?
No body, no evidence,
We
no answers.
have a story
Just
for
empty
you.
spaces where lives used to be, and questions that haunt the ones left behind. Tonight, we're exploring 10 missing person cases that have baffled investigators for decades. From America's first colony that disappeared into history to modern mysteries that remain unsolved, these are real stories, real people, real families still searching for the truth. So settle in, turn down the lights, and let the rain wash over you as we journey into the darkest corners of these unsolved disappearances. Because sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't what we know happened, it's what we'll never know. The Vanishing of Roanoke. I've always been fascinated by history, the kind that gets glossed over in textbooks, the mysteries that historians whisper about in dimly lit archives. But nothing prepared me for what I discovered when I started researching my family tree 3 years ago. My grandmother always told me we had ancestors who came over on the Mayflower, but she was wrong. Our lineage goes back even further, to something far more disturbing, to a colony that simply ceased to exist. It started when I found a leather-bound journal in my grandmother's attic after she passed. The pages were yellow and brittle. The ink faded to a rust-brown color that made my stomach turn. But what really got me was the name on the first page. Thomas Coleman, 1587. The same year, the lost colony of Roanoke was established. I should explain something about Roanoke for those who don't know the story. In 1587, around 117 English men, women, and children sailed across the Atlantic to establish England's first permanent colony in the New World. They settled on Roanoke Island, off what's now the coast of North Carolina. Their governor, John White, had to return to England for supplies, but the war with Spain delayed his return for 3 years. When he finally came back in August 1590, he found the settlement completely deserted. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just the word Croatoan carved into a wooden post and crow carved into a tree, and 115 people vanished without a trace. What happened to them has been one of America's greatest mysteries for over 400 years. Until I read Thomas Coleman's journal. The first entries were mundane. Thomas was a carpenter, and he wrote about building houses, about the difficulty of working with the local wood, about his wife Eleanor and their newborn daughter. But as the weeks turned into months after Governor White left, the tone began to change. The 12th of July, 1588. The stores are running low. We have eaten the last of the salted pork. John Sampson caught fish today, but 3 of them had strange growths on their bellies. We threw them back, but I wonder if we made a mistake. The hunger is getting worse. The 3rd of September, 1588. The Croatoan people visited again today. They brought deer meat and corn. Mateo says his people want us to come live with them on Hatteras Island. Many are considering it. Eleanor thinks we should stay, that Governor White will return soon, but it has been over a year. How much longer can we wait? The 28th of November, 1588. Thomas Archard has gone mad. He ran into the woods 3 days ago, screaming that he saw his dead mother walking among the trees. We found him this morning, or what was left of him. The animals had gotten to him, they said, but I saw the wounds. Those weren't made by any animal I know. I turned the pages with trembling hands. The entries became more sporadic, more desperate. The 15th of January, 1589. Half the colony is sick with fever. We are burning the bodies now. There are too many to bury. Eleanor refuses to let me touch our daughter. She says something is wrong with the child's eyes. I haven't looked. I'm afraid of what I might see. The 20th of February, 1589. The decision has been made. We are leaving Roanoke, not for Croatoan, as originally planned. Something else has been decided. Something the elders won't speak of in front of the younger members, but I hear them whispering late at night. They speak of a place inland, of a sanctuary promised by the medicine man of the Weepemiac tribe. They speak of survival, but the way they say it makes my blood run cold. The 1st of March, 1589. Before we left, Ananias Dare carved the message Governor White would see. Searotone. A misdirection. We don't want to be found. What we're doing. What we've agreed to do. God forgive us, but we have no choice. Eleanor and the baby are so thin now. We all are. And the things we've seen in the woods. The shapes that move between the trees at night, watching us with eyes that reflect our torchlight like an animal's, but standing upright like men. We cannot stay here. The 8th of March, 1589. We reached the inland settlement 3 days ago. I cannot describe this place properly. It is not on any map. The Weepemiok brought us here through paths that seemed to shift and change as we walked. Eleanor says I am delirious with hunger, but I swear the trees moved to let us pass, and then closed behind us, sealing us in. There are others here, not just Weepemiok, but people from different tribes, and some who wear the remnants of Spanish armor, though they speak no Spanish, only a strange clicking language that hurts my ears. They have been here a long time. Years, decades, perhaps longer. They have food here, plenty of it, gardens that shouldn't grow in this season, game that walks right up to the hunters as if bewitched. But there is a price for this abundance. There is always a price. The 10th of March, 1589. I understand now why we can never leave, why no one leaves this place. We have eaten their food, we have drunk from their spring, and now we are changing. Eleanor's eyes have gone completely black. Our daughter doesn't cry anymore, just stares with those ancient, knowing eyes. My own reflection in the water shows a face I barely recognize, but we are alive. Alive and fed, and safe from whatever hunts in the outer woods. That is what we tell ourselves. That is the lie we must believe. The last entry was dated the 15th of March, 1589. If anyone finds this journal, burn it. Do not look for us. Do not try to find where we have gone. The price of survival here is too high, but we have paid it, and there is no going back. We are the lost colony. Lost not to circumstance or catastrophe, but to choice. We chose to survive, and in doing so, we chose to become something else. Something that no longer needs to be found. Governor White, if you read this, forgive us. Tell our families in England that we died with honor. Do not tell them the truth. Do not tell them that we live still, in this place beyond maps, sustained by forces we do not understand and dare not question. And whatever you do not come looking for us, for if you find this place, you will never leave. I sat in that attic for hours after reading the journal, my hands shaking, my mind reeling. The journal went on for several more pages, but they were blank, or rather, they appeared blank at first. When I held them up to the light, I could see faint impressions, as if someone had written on them and then erased the words, or as if the words themselves had faded away, unwilling to be remembered. I did some research. I found that in 2013, archaeologists discovered evidence on Hatteras Island that some colonists had lived there, integrating with the Croatoan people. They found European artifacts mixed with Native American ones, evidence of metallurgy, of lives lived and ended in that place. But they never found evidence of all 115 colonists. Where were the rest? Where were the people like Thomas Coleman and his wife Eleanor and their strange-eyed child? I made the mistake of trying to find out. Last summer, I drove down to North Carolina. I spent weeks combing through the woods near where Roanoke Island used to be, following vague references in Thomas Coleman's journal, trying to trace the route the colonists might have taken inland. And one night, deep in the Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge, I found it. A clearing that wasn't on any map, trees arranged in a perfect circle, so old they seemed petrified, their bark smooth and black like obsidian. In the center of the circle, a spring of water that bubbled up from the ground, crystal clear and ice cold even in the July heat. And around that spring, carved into the ancient trees, I saw them, names, dates, messages. Thomas Coleman. Arrived March 1589. Still here. Eleanor Coleman. Born 1589. 563, died 1942. Margaret Harvey came with the colony, waiting still. The dates made no sense. Eleanor Coleman died in 1942, but she would have been born in 1563, making her nearly 400 years old. It wasn't possible, unless Thomas had been telling the truth. Unless this place, this settlement beyond maps, really could sustain life in ways that defied nature. I should have run. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to turn around and never come back. But I was thirsty. I'd been walking for hours in the heat, and my water bottle was empty. And that spring looked so cool, so inviting. I knelt down and cupped my hands in the water. That's when I saw them. Reflections in the surface of the spring, but not reflections of the trees or the sky. Reflections of faces, dozens of them, hundreds, all looking up at me from some impossible depth, their eyes black and knowing and patient. And at the front, I saw her, a woman in Elizabethan dress, her face gaunt but beautiful, holding a child with those same ancient eyes. Eleanor Coleman, still waiting, still surviving. I dropped my hands and ran. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. I ran until I found the main road, until I flagged down a passing car and begged them to drive me back to town. I never went back to that clearing. I never tried to find it again. But sometimes, late at night, I feel so thirsty. Thirsty in a way that no water can satisfy. And I remember how cool that spring looked, how inviting, how easy it would be to find it again, to drink from it, to pay the price that Thomas Coleman and his family paid all those years ago, the price of survival. I keep Thomas's journal locked in a safe now. I tell myself I'll burn it someday, like he asked, but I haven't, because part of me wonders if that's why it survived all these years, passed down through generations of my family. Part of me wonders if it's not a warning, but an invitation to the place where the lost colony is still living, still waiting, still hungry for company after all these years. The Heiress who vanished. I work at a rare bookstore in Manhattan, not one of those trendy places with exposed brick and overpriced coffee. The real deal, the kind of place where millionaires come looking for first editions and elderly collectors spend their afternoons arguing about provenance. 6 months ago, a woman came in and sold us a box of books, old ones, leather-bound, the kind that smell like dust and secrets. Among them was a diary, brown leather with brass fittings, and when I opened it, I saw the name written in elegant script on the first page, Dorothy Harriet Camille Arnold, December 1910. I'd heard the name before. Every New Yorker has, if they know their city's history. Dorothy Arnold was a socialite, the daughter of a wealthy perfume importer, who vanished while shopping on Fifth Avenue on the 12th of December, 1910. She left her house that morning in a blue skirt suit and a black velvet hat with blue silk roses. She was seen buying chocolates at Park and Tilford, then at Brentano's bookstore, and then she was gone. No body was ever found, no ransom note, no trace, just a 5-year-old woman who stepped out of her privileged life and into one of America's oldest unsolved disappearances. But here in my hands was her diary, the final entries, the ones that explained everything. I should have turned it over to the police, or to a museum, or to someone official, but I didn't. I read it instead, alone in the back room of the bookstore after we closed, and what I found there changed everything I thought I knew about Dorothy Arnold's disappearance. The first entries were exactly what you'd expect from a young woman of her class and time. Complaints about social obligations, daydreams about her secret boyfriend, a man named George Griscom Jr., whom her family didn't approve of, frustrations about her failed attempts to become a published writer. But as December approached, the entries took on a different tone. The 28th of November, 1910. I saw her again today, the woman in the gray dress. She was standing outside Brentano's, just watching me through the window. When I came out, she was gone. Mother says I'm being fanciful, that the stress of the rejection letters is making me see things. But I know what I saw, and I've been seeing her for weeks now. The 1st of December 1910, the woman approached me today. Up close, she looked older than I first thought, though her face was somehow ageless. She knew my name. She knew about George. She knew about the stories I'd written that no one would publish. She said she could help me. She said there was a place where people like me could go, people who felt trapped by expectations, by society's rules, by families that didn't understand. She gave me a card. There was no name on it, just an address in Greenwich Village and a time, midnight, the 5th of December, 1910. I went to the address. I don't know why. Curiosity, perhaps, or desperation. The rejection from McClure's magazine last week was the final straw. Father says I should give up writing, that it's not becoming for a woman of my station. He's already arranged for me to meet with the Whitestone boy next week. A marriage prospect, as if I'm cattle to be sold to the highest bidder. The building was unassuming from the outside, a brownstone, like any other in the village. But inside was something else entirely. There were others there, men and women from all walks of life. A woman who said she'd been expected to marry a man 3 times her age. A young man whose family had disowned him for loving someone they deemed inappropriate. An artist whose work was considered too scandalous for polite society. All of them trapped, all of them looking for a way out. The woman in gray, she never told me her real name, just called herself the facilitator, explained the arrangement. For a price, she could help us disappear, not just run away, but truly vanish, leaving no trace that could ever be followed. New identities, new lives, freedom. The price was steep. Everything we owned, everything we were, our old lives had to be completely erased. I told her I would think about it. The 10th of December, 1910. George has left for Europe. He sailed yesterday without even saying goodbye. His letter arrived this morning. He says his family has forbidden him from seeing me, that he's sorry, that perhaps someday we can find a way to be together, but not now. Not while his father controls his inheritance. I crumpled the letter and threw it in the fire. Then I retrieved the card the facilitator had given me. I know what I have to do. The 11th of December, 1910. Tomorrow I will go shopping as planned. I will be seen by the clerks at Park and Tilford, at Brentano's. I will establish my routine, my movements, and then I will slip away. The facilitator has given me detailed instructions. There is a car waiting on a side street off 5th Avenue. I am to walk past Brentano's, turn onto East 27th Street, and get in the car quickly. No hesitation, no looking back. From there, they will take me to a safe house. My hair will be cut and dyed, my clothes burned, my jewelry sold to fund my new life. Within a week, Dorothy Arnold will cease to exist, and I will become someone else, someone free. I feel guilty about mother and father. They will worry, they will search, but they will never find me because I will make sure of it, and perhaps, in time, they will move on. They will have Marjorie. She's always been the better daughter anyway. The 12th of December, 1910, morning. This is my last entry as Dorothy Arnold. By tonight, I will be someone new. I'm taking only this diary as a reminder of who I was and why I chose to leave. If anyone ever finds this, please understand. I wasn't kidnapped. I wasn't murdered. I chose this. I chose freedom over a gilded cage. I chose the unknown over a life that had already been planned out for me. Every year, every month, every day, until I died a respectable old woman who had never truly lived. I have no regrets. I am ready. The diary ended there. The rest of the pages were blank. I sat there for a long time, holding those fragile pages, trying to process what I'd read. If this was real, if Dorothy Arnold had really staged her own disappearance, then it meant that everything the police and her family had believed for over a century was wrong. She hadn't been kidnapped. She hadn't fallen victim to foul play. She had simply left. But something bothered me. The woman in the gray dress, the facilitator. Who was she? And how did she help people disappear so completely that no trace was ever found? I started researching, and what I found made my blood run cold. Dorothy Arnold wasn't the only wealthy young woman to disappear around that time. In the years between 1905 and 1915, at least a dozen women from prominent families vanished without a trace in New York City. The cases were all similar. The women were last seen shopping or running errands. No bodies were found. No ransom notes. Just gone. The police at the time attributed it to white slavery, to kidnappers who preyed on wealthy young women. But what if it was something else? What if there really had been a network, an organization that helped people disappear? I dug deeper, and in a collection of old newspapers at the New York Public Library, I found a small classified ad that ran in the Village Voice from 1909 to 1914. Tired of your old life? Want to start fresh? Discreet assistance available. Midnight consultations only. No questions asked. It listed an address, the same address that Dorothy had written in her diary. Against my better judgment, I went there. The building still stood, though it had been converted into expensive condos, but in the basement, accessible through a service entrance that the current residents probably didn't even know existed, I found a door. It was locked, but the wood was old and rotted, and with a little effort, I managed to force it open. Inside was a room that looked like it hadn't been touched in 100 years. There was a desk, a filing cabinet, a few chairs, and on the walls, dozens of photographs, women and men, all dressed in early 20th century clothing, all looking directly at the camera with expressions of hope mixed with fear. And beneath each photo, handwritten notes. Margaret Stone, 1907. Relocated to San Francisco. New name, Mary Sullivan. Robert Hastings, 1911. Relocated to New Orleans. New name, Richard Hall. Dorothy Arnold, 1910. Relocated to Chicago. New name, Donna Adams. I pulled Dorothy's photo from the wall with shaking hands. In it, she looked younger than in the famous missing person photos that had circulated after her disappearance. She was smiling, and behind her, barely visible in the shadows of the photograph, stood a figure in a gray dress. The facilitator. I turned the photo over. On the back, in faded ink, was an address in Chicago and a date, the 15th of December, 1910, 3 days after her disappearance. I should have left it there. I should have walked away and let Dorothy Arnold's secret stay buried. But I couldn't. I had to know if she'd really made it, if she'd found the freedom she was looking for. I flew to Chicago. The address led me to a cemetery on the north side. And there, after hours of searching through records and crumbling headstones, I found it. Donna Adams, born 1885, died 1975, beloved wife and mother. The dates were wrong, of course. If this was really Dorothy, she'd been born in 1885, not 1885, but it was close enough to be her. I did the math. If Dorothy had lived until 1975, she would have been 90 years old. A long life, a full life, far longer than she would have had if she'd stayed in New York and married the Whitestone boy and lived the life her father had planned for her. I traced the name forward. Donna Adams had married in 1914 to a man named James Wilder. They'd had 3 children, grandchildren, a whole family that had grown from Dorothy Arnold's desperate bid for freedom, and none of them knew. None of them had any idea that their grandmother, their beloved Nana Donna, had once been one of America's most famous missing persons. I tracked down one of the grandchildren, an old woman in her 70s named Patricia, who lived in a nursing home on the outskirts of Chicago. When I showed her the photo of Dorothy Arnold, her eyes went wide. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. I told her about the diary, about the room, about the facilitator. She listened in silence, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. When I finished, she reached under her pillow and pulled out a small leather journal. The same brown leather with brass fittings as the diary I'd found in the bookstore. "She gave this to me before she died," Patricia said. "Made me promise never to show anyone. Made me promise to burn it when I died. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. She handed it to me. I opened it with trembling hands. The entries started in 1910, right where the other diary had ended. But these entries were different. These were written by Donna Adams, not Dorothy Arnold. They chronicled a new life. Struggles and joys, the fear of being caught, the guilt of leaving her family, but also the relief, the freedom, the ability to choose her own path. The last entry was dated 1974, written in a shaky hand. "I am dying. The doctors say I have weeks, maybe days. My children are with me, my grandchildren, all of them products of a life I chose for myself, not one that was chosen for me. People often ask me if I have regrets, and I do. I regret the pain I caused my parents. I regret never being able to tell them I was safe, I was happy, I was free. But I don't regret leaving. I don't regret becoming Donna Adams instead of remaining Dorothy Arnold, because Dorothy Arnold would have died long ago, suffocated by expectations and propriety and a life she never wanted. But Donna Adams lived. She loved. She created a family that she chose, a life that she built with her own hands. If anyone ever finds out the truth, I hope they understand. I hope they don't judge me too harshly for the choice I made. I hope they know that sometimes the only way to survive is to disappear." I closed the journal and looked at Patricia. She was watching me with her grandmother's eyes, Dorothy's eyes. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Are you going to tell people? Solve the mystery?" I thought about it. I thought about the sensation it would cause, the headlines, the revelation that would rewrite history books and close one of America's oldest cold cases. And then I thought about Dorothy Arnold, who had risked everything for the chance to live life on her own terms, who had found that life and lived it fully, and died surrounded by people she loved. "No," I said finally. "No, I don't think I will." I handed the journal back to Patricia. She squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong for such a frail-looking woman. "Thank you," she whispered. I left Chicago the next day. I put the diary I'd found in the bookstore back in its box and filed it away in our storage room, unmarked and unread. And I deleted all the research I'd done, all the photos I'd taken, because some mysteries are meant to stay unsolved. Some disappearances are meant to remain disappearances, and Dorothy Arnold deserves to rest in peace, not as a missing person, but as Donna Adams, a woman who lived and loved and died free. But late at night, when the bookstore is closed and I'm alone in the back room, I sometimes wonder about the facilitator, about the woman in the gray dress who helped so many people vanish into new lives. Who was she? Is she still out there, helping the desperate and the trapped escape their gilded cages? And sometimes, when life gets too heavy and the world feels too small, I find myself looking through old classifieds in the Village Voice, wondering if that ad might appear again someday, wondering if I might see those words. "Tired of your old life? Want to start fresh? Discreet assistance available." Wondering if I'd have the courage to show up at midnight. If I did. The Skyjacker's leap. My grandfather died last month. He was 96 years old, had lived a good life, never caused anyone any trouble. A quiet man who kept to himself, worked as an accountant for 40 years, retired to a small house in Oregon. When we were cleaning out his house, we found a locked box in the basement. It took us 3 days to get it open without damaging it. Inside was $180,000 in $20 bills, all of them printed before 1971, all of them in sequential serial numbers, along with a parachute harness and a black tie with a pearl tie clip. Let me tell you a story about a man named Dan Cooper, though history knows him as D.B. Cooper. And let me tell you why my grandfather had nearly $200,000 in old 20s hidden in his basement. It was Thanksgiving Eve, 1971, November 24th, a Wednesday. A man in his mid-40s walked into Portland International Airport and bought a one-way ticket to Seattle with cash. Gave his name as Dan Cooper, wore a dark suit, a white shirt, a thin black tie with a pearl tie clip, sunglasses, even though it was overcast, polite, quiet, unremarkable. He boarded Northwest Orient Flight 305, ordered a bourbon and soda, lit a cigarette, and then, somewhere over Washington, he handed a flight attendant named Florence Schaffner a note. The note said he had a bomb. What followed became the only unsolved case of air piracy in American history. Cooper demanded $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes. He threatened to blow up the plane if his demands weren't met. The plane landed in Seattle, where FBI agents scrambled to get the money and the chutes. Cooper released the passengers. Then he ordered the crew to fly to Mexico City with a refueling stop in Reno. Somewhere over the dense forests of southwestern Washington, around 8 p.m., Cooper lowered the rear stairs of the Boeing 727, strapped the money to himself with one of the parachutes, and jumped into the night, into a rainstorm, over wilderness. Wearing a business suit and loafers, the FBI searched for weeks. They found nothing. No parachute, no body, no trace. Just a man who vanished into the darkness with $200,000 and became a legend. Except they did find something 9 years later. A boy camping with his family found bundles of the ransom money buried on the banks of the Columbia River, $5,800 worth. The serial numbers matched, but where was the rest? Where was Cooper? For 50 years, no one knew. Until now. My grandfather's name was Daniel Cooperman. He went by Dan his whole life, and if you looked at photos of him from 1971, from before he started dyeing his hair gray and wearing thick glasses and putting on weight deliberately, you'd see a man in his mid-40s with dark hair and a thin build. A man who could have easily passed for the composite sketches the FBI circulated of D.B. Cooper. Along with the money and the harness, we found a journal, more of a confession, really. Written in my grandfather's cramped handwriting, dated just a few months before he died. He must have known the end was coming, must have decided it was time to tell the truth. I'm going to share what he wrote. Not all of it, but the important parts. The parts that explain how a mild-mannered accountant became America's most famous fugitive, and how he got away with it. November 1971. I was dying. The doctors had given me 6 months, maybe less. Lung cancer, stage 4, inoperable. I was 47 years old. I'd worked my whole life, saved every penny, and now I was going to die with $3,000 in the bank and a wife who'd be left with nothing but debt. I didn't plan it, not at first. The idea came to me while reading the newspaper. There had been other hijackings that year, other men who'd demanded money and gotten away with it, at least temporarily. And I thought, why not? I'm dying anyway. What can they do to me that cancer hasn't already done? The hardest part was getting the fake ID. I still had contacts from my days in the army, guys who knew guys who could make documents that would pass inspection. I became Dan Cooper, just my first name and part of my last name. Easy to remember, easy to respond to if someone called it out. The bomb was fake. I knew enough about electronics from my time in the service to make something that looked real. Red, cylindrical road flares and a mess of wires in a briefcase. It wouldn't have fooled a real bomb expert, but it didn't have to. It just had to fool a flight attendant long enough to get the plane on the ground. I studied the Boeing 727 for weeks. I knew that plane, inside and out. I knew about the rear air stair, how it could be lowered in flight. I knew the fuel capacity, the maximum range, the airspeed limitations. I'd been a flight engineer in the military. This was my specialty. The night before, I couldn't sleep. Part of me thought about calling it off. But then I remembered the doctor's face when he'd told me I was dying. The pitying look, "I'm sorry, but there's nothing we can do." And I thought about Margaret, my wife, and how she'd struggle after I was gone. How she'd lose the house. How she'd have nothing. This was for her. That's what I told myself. The hijacking went almost exactly as planned. The flight attendant, Miss Schaffner, was professional. So were the pilots. Everyone stayed calm. When we landed in Seattle and they brought the money and the parachutes, I made sure to be polite. I said please and thank you. I wasn't a monster. I was just desperate. After the passengers were released, we took off again. I sent the remaining flight attendant to the cockpit and locked the door behind her. Then I was alone. The jump was the hardest part. I'd done parachute training in the Army, but that was decades ago, and I'd never jumped at night, in a storm, over unknown terrain. My hands were shaking as I strapped on the chute. I tied the money bag to myself with paracord. I opened the rear stairs. The wind was incredible. It tore at me, tried to rip me back into the plane. The rain was icy cold, and we were flying at 10,000 feet, which meant the temperature was below freezing. I couldn't see anything below me, just darkness and clouds and the distant lights of what might have been Portland. I stood on those stairs for what felt like forever, and then I jumped. I don't remember much about the fall. It was dark and loud, and I was terrified. When the chute opened, I thought the jerk might tear me in half. The money bag was swinging wildly, throwing me off balance. I couldn't see where I was going to land. I hit the trees hard. Branches tore at me, ripped my suit, cut my face and hands. One of them caught the money bag and tore it open. I watched bills flutter away into the darkness, lost forever. There was nothing I could do. I must have fallen 30 feet before I hit the ground. The impact knocked the wind out of me. I lay there in the mud, in the rain, my body screaming with pain, and I thought, this is it. This is how I die. Not from cancer, but from stupidity, from desperation. But I didn't die. After a while, I managed to catch my breath. I managed to stand. I'd lost a lot of the money in the trees, but I still had most of it. The parachute was tangled in the branches above me, and I left it there. I buried the harness and the reserve chute under a pile of rocks and leaves. I took off my tie and my shoes and stuffed them in with the harness. Then I started walking. I walked for 2 days, following the Lewis River, staying off roads, avoiding any sign of civilization. The FBI would be looking for me. I knew that. Helicopters, search parties, the works. So I stayed hidden during the day and moved at night. On the 3rd day, I reached a logging road. I followed it until I found a truck with keys in the ignition. Old loggers' trick, leaving keys in case someone broke down and needed to get to civilization. I borrowed that truck, drove it to a small town I'd never heard of, left it at a gas station with a full tank and a $20 bill under the sun visor. From there, I took a bus to Seattle, then another bus to Portland. Then I walked the rest of the way home. Margaret was asleep when I got there. It was 3 a.m. I washed up in the garage, burned my torn suit in the burn barrel, buried what was left of the money in the basement. Then I climbed into bed next to my wife, like nothing had happened. The next morning, the news was full of the hijacking, the mysterious D.B. Cooper who'd vanished into the night. I watched with Margaret, and I made all the right comments. Crazy what people will do for money. Hope they catch the guy. Can you believe it? The FBI came to talk to me 3 weeks later. Routine interviews. They were talking to everyone who'd bought a plane ticket with cash in the Portland area around that time. I answered their questions, showed them my ID, told them I'd been home with my wife that night, which was technically true. I'd gotten home eventually. They never came back. The amazing thing was the cancer. Remember how I said I had 6 months to live? 6 months after the hijacking, I was still alive. A year later, still alive. I went back to the doctor. They ran tests. The cancer was gone. Just gone. The doctor called it a spontaneous remission. A miracle. I called it a second chance. Margaret died in 1995. I never told her, never spent a cent of the money. It just sat in that box in the basement, waiting. I don't know what I was waiting for. Maybe for the statute of limitations to run out. Maybe for the guilt to fade. Maybe for the FBI to finally connect the dots and come knocking on my door. They never did. I lived a good life after that. I watched my grandchildren grow up. I volunteered at the local library. I donated to charity, always with checks, never cash. I became the person I'd always wanted to be. Kind, helpful, unremarkable, but I never forgot. And sometimes, late at night, I'd go down to the basement and look at that box, at the money and the harness and the tie, evidence of the one reckless, desperate thing I'd ever done, the thing that should have killed me but somehow saved my life instead. I don't know if what I did was right. I don't know if the ends justified the means. I stole $200,000 from an airline, terrified dozens of people, made myself into a fugitive and a legend. And for what? For money I never spent? For a life I would have lived anyway? Cancer or no cancer? But I do know this. I survived. Against all odds, against all logic, I survived. The jump didn't kill me. The FBI didn't catch me. The cancer went away, and I got to live another 45 years. So maybe it was worth it. Maybe that one desperate leap into the darkness, that one reckless gamble, bought me everything that came after. Or maybe I just got lucky. I guess no one will ever know. The journal ended there. We found it 2 weeks after the funeral, along with the money and the physical evidence. For a while, we debated what to do with it. Turn it in to the FBI? Keep it quiet? Donate the money anonymously? In the end, we compromised. We kept the journal. We kept some of the money, enough to pay for my grandmother's headstone, which my grandfather had never been able to afford in life. The rest we donated to cancer research, anonymously, through a series of complicated transfers that couldn't be traced back to us. And we burned the harness and the tie, just like my grandfather should have done 50 years ago. The FBI officially closed the D.B. Cooper case in 2016, citing a lack of credible leads. They assumed he died in the jump, that no one could have survived it in a business suit and loafers, in a rainstorm, over wilderness. They were wrong. Dan Cooper survived. He became Daniel Cooperman again, went back to his quiet life, lived to be 96 years old. He died in his sleep, peacefully, surrounded by his family. He's buried next to Margaret in a small cemetery in Oregon, under a simple headstone that says, "Beloved husband, father, grandfather." There's no mention of the jump, no hint of the legend, just a man's name and his dates and the people who loved him. But now you know the truth. D.B. Cooper didn't die in the wilderness of Washington. He didn't disappear into mythology. He just came home, put the money in a box, and lived a long, quiet life. And sometimes, I think about that. About how the biggest mysteries aren't always the ones that go unsolved. Sometimes they're the ones that get solved but never get told. The secrets that die with the people who kept them. The truths that stay buried in basements and journals and memories. My grandfather was D.B. Cooper, and now, with his death, the last person who knew for certain is gone, except for me. And I'm telling you, not because I want fame or attention or to reopen a closed case, but because I think my grandfather would want someone to know that he survived, that his desperate gamble paid off, that he got his miracle, even if it came at the price of living with the secret for the rest of his life. Even if he could never tell anyone, never spend the money, never admit to being the man who jumped from a plane into legend. He survived, and maybe, in the end, that's all that matters. The writer who walked into darkness. I teach American literature at a small college in California. Every semester, I assign the same short story, An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge by Ambrose Bierce. It's a masterpiece of psychological horror, a Civil War tale about a man being hanged who experiences an elaborate escape in the final moments before death, only to discover it was all a dying hallucination. Kurt Vonnegut called it the greatest American short story ever written. My students usually hate it. They say it's a trick, a cheap twist ending, but I keep teaching it because I know something they don't. I know that Ambrose Bierce lived that story. Not the hanging part, but the escape into hallucination, into a reality that might not be real at all. Because I met him, or I met someone who claimed to be him. Let me explain. Last year, I was in Mexico for a research trip. I'd received a small grant to explore Bierce's final journey, to retrace the steps he took in 1913 when he vanished into the Mexican Revolution. At 71 years old, the famous writer had left Washington, D.C., toured his old Civil War battlefields, and then crossed the border from El Paso into the chaos of revolutionary Mexico. His last known letter was dated the 26th of December, 1913, from Chihuahua City. He wrote to a friend named Blanche Partington, "As to me, I leave here tomorrow for an unknown destination," and then nothing. Silence. A man who had lived such a vivid, documented life simply stepped out of history. The official theories are straightforward. He was killed in the fighting, executed by Pancho Villa's men as a suspected spy, or he died of illness in the desert and his body was never found. Some romantic souls believe he staged his own death, that he wandered into the Grand Canyon to end his life on his own terms, using Mexico as a cover story. But I found something else. I was in a tiny town called Sierra Mojada, deep in the Chihuahua Desert. There's a cemetery there with a cenotaph for Bierce, installed by a priest who believed the writer had been executed and buried in that dusty graveyard. The gravestone reads, "Very trustworthy witnesses suppose that here lie the remains of Ambrose Bierce." I was photographing the memorial when an old man approached me. He was ancient, his face carved deep with wrinkles, his eyes the color of desert sand. He wore clothes that looked like they were from another era. A linen shirt, suspenders, trousers that had been mended many times. "You're looking for Bierce," he said in perfect English, though with an accent I couldn't quite place. I told him yes, that I was researching the writer's disappearance. He smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant smile. "Disappearance," he repeated. "That's what they call it when someone chooses not to be found." I asked him what he meant. He gestured to a small cantina across the dirt road. "Buy me a drink," he said, "and I'll tell you a story. A true story, though you won't believe it. No one ever does." We sat in the cantina's dim interior, away from the brutal afternoon sun. He ordered mezcal, drank it in one swallow, ordered another. Then he began to talk. "My name is Thomas. At least, that's the name I've used for the past century. Before that, I had another name. Many names, actually. I've lived a long time, you see. Too long. I thought he was crazy, of course. But I let him talk. In December 1913, I was 23 years old, fighting with Villa's forces. We were camped outside Chihuahua, preparing for the next battle. And one night, this old American came walking into our camp. Tall, thin, dressed all in black. He said his name was Ambrose Bierce, and he wanted to observe the revolution for a story he was writing. I leaned forward. This matched the historical record. Villa liked him, Thomas continued. The old man had been a soldier in the American Civil War. He understood war, and he had this way of talking, sharp and funny, that made even Villa laugh, so we let him stay. He rode with us for a few weeks, watching the fighting, taking notes in a little leather book he carried everywhere. Thomas poured himself more mezcal. His hands were steady, despite his apparent age, but there was something strange about him. He talked about death like it was an old friend. He said he'd been living borrowed time for years, that every day since the war had been a gift he didn't deserve. He said he was tired of living but afraid of dying, trapped between two states of being. "What happened to him?" I asked. "We came to a place," Thomas said softly, "an old Spanish mission in the mountains. abandoned for centuries, but not empty, never empty. The locals wouldn't go near it. They said it was cursed, that people who entered came out changed. If they came out at all. He paused, refilled his glass. Bierce wanted to see it. I tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. He said he'd spent his whole life writing about the supernatural, about ghosts and the unexplained. He wanted to see if any of it was real. He wanted to find something that would make sense of the horror he'd seen in the war, the meaningless death and suffering. So he went inside. We both did. I was young and stupid, and I thought I was brave. We entered at dusk, carrying torches. The mission was wrong. The architecture made no sense. Halls that should have led back to the entrance led deeper inside. Rooms that seemed to shift and change when you weren't looking. And the silence. No birds, no insects, no wind. Just silence. Tomas's voice dropped to barely a whisper. We found them in the central chapel. The priests, or what was left of them. They'd been dead for maybe 300 years, but their bodies hadn't decayed. They were sitting in the pews, perfectly preserved, their hands folded in prayer. And on the altar, there was a book. Not a Bible, something else, something old. Bierce picked it up. I told him not to, but he did anyway. And when he opened it, the air changed, got thick, heavy. The torches flickered and went out, but we could still see. The priest's eyes were open, looking at us, watching. I must have looked skeptical, because Tomas laughed. You don't believe me. That's fine. I wouldn't believe me either. But I was there. I saw what happened next. What happened? Bierce read from the book. Just one passage, out loud. The words weren't in any language I recognized, but they hurt to hear, like hooks dragging through my skull. And then the priests stood up, all of them, moving like puppets, jerky and wrong. They surrounded us, and one of them spoke. Tomas's eyes were distant now, seeing something I couldn't. It said that we had opened a door that had been sealed for centuries. It said that time worked differently in that place, that the mission existed outside the normal flow of the world. It offered us a choice: leave and forget everything we'd seen, or stay and learn the truth about death and time and the thin places between realities. And Bierce stayed. I said. No, Tomas said. We both stayed. Bierce because he wanted answers, me because I was too frightened to leave alone. And the priests taught us. They showed us how time could be folded, how a single moment could be stretched into years, how death was just another door you could choose to walk through or not. Bierce lived there, Tomas continued, in that mission, for years, decades maybe, though time didn't pass the same way inside as it did outside. He wrote constantly, new stories, new essays, variations on themes he'd explored in his published work, but darker, stranger. He said he'd finally found what he'd been looking for his whole life. Proof that the horror was real, that the universe was exactly as cold and indifferent and strange as he'd always suspected. And you? I asked. I couldn't take it. The isolation, the wrongness of that place. After what felt like 50 years but was probably only a few months outside, I left. I walked out of that mission and found that only weeks had passed. Villa's forces had moved on. The revolution continued without me. And I was changed. He held up his hands. They looked old, yes, but not impossibly so. I stopped aging. Or rather, I aged so slowly that 100 years feels like 10. The priests told me it was the price of leaving. I'd been touched by that place, and I could never truly be part of the normal world again. I'm stuck, just like Bierce, except I chose to live in the world instead of outside it. Is he still there? I asked. In the mission? Tomas nodded slowly. I've been back a few times over the years. The mission is still there, still wrong, and Bierce is still inside, still writing, still exploring that space between life and death. He's happy, in his way. He found what he was looking for. Why are you telling me this? Because, Tomas said, you're not the first to come looking. Every few years, someone shows up, asking about Bierce, wanting to solve the mystery. And I tell them the truth, knowing they won't believe it, knowing they'll write it off as the ramblings of a crazy old man. But I keep telling it anyway, because someone should know, someone should understand that Bierce didn't die. He just went somewhere else. He stood up, left a few coins on the table. If you want to see for yourself, I can show you where the mission is. But I warn you, you might not come back. Or if you do, you might not come back the same. I should have refused. Any sane person would have. But I'm a literature professor who spent her whole career studying Bierce's work, and the chance to solve the greatest mystery in American letters was too tempting to resist. Show me, I said. We drove for hours into the desert, far from any marked roads. Tomas navigated by landmarks I couldn't see, turns I wouldn't have known to make. The sun was setting when we finally stopped at the base of a small mountain. It's up there, he said, pointing to a path I could barely make out. I won't go with you. Once was enough for me. But if you go in, remember, time is different there. What feels like hours might be days outside, or years. And whatever you do, don't read from the book. I climbed the path as darkness fell. And there, hidden in a fold of the mountain, I found it. A Spanish mission, its walls still standing despite centuries of abandonment. The door was open, inviting. I stepped inside. The silence hit me first, just like Tomas had described. Then, the wrongness of the architecture, the way the halls seemed to bend in ways that defied physics. I followed them deeper, my phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness. And in the central chapel, I found them. The priests, sitting in the pews, their preservation impossible but undeniable. And at the back of the chapel, lit by a single candle that should have burned out centuries ago, I saw him, an old man, impossibly old, sitting at a desk covered in papers. He was writing with a fountain pen, his handwriting cramped and precise. He looked up when I entered, and his eyes were sharp and aware, burning with an intelligence that made my breath catch. Another seeker, he said, and his voice was exactly how I'd imagined it would be. Cultured, sardonic, with an edge of dark humor. How many years has it been out there? 2024, I managed to say. He nodded thoughtfully. 111 years. No time at all, really. And yet, eternity. Are you Ambrose Bierce? I was, once. Now I'm something else. A student, an observer, a man trapped in the moment between heartbeats, exploring all the possibilities that exist in that infinite space. He gestured to the papers on his desk. I've written 17 novels here, hundreds of stories, essays on the nature of time and consciousness, all of it too strange, too true, to ever be published in your world. But that doesn't matter. I'm not writing for an audience anymore. I'm writing to understand. Understand what? Why we die, why we suffer, why the universe is structured in such a way that consciousness arises only to be extinguished. I've found some answers here. Not good answers, mind you, not comforting ones, but answers nonetheless. I pulled out my phone, tried to take a picture. He laughed. It won't work. Nothing from your world works properly here. This place exists in the cracks, in the spaces between moments. You can visit, but you can't take anything back. Just memories. And even those will fade, will seem like a dream you can't quite remember. Come back with me, I said. The world thinks you're dead. Come back and publish your work. Show people what you've discovered. And return to what? He said gently. A world where I'm a relic from another century, where everything I knew is gone, everyone I loved is dust. No, thank you. I prefer it here, where time has no meaning and I can write forever without the burden of publication, of criticism, of mortality. He returned to his writing. You should go, he said without looking up. Before too much time passes, the door is closing. It always does, eventually. I wanted to stay, to read his work, to understand what he'd learned in that impossible place, but I could feel it, the weight of time pressing down, the sense that if I stayed much longer, I wouldn't be able to leave at all. I ran, back through the twisting halls, out into the mountain air. When I turned back, the mission was gone, just bare rock, as if it had never existed. Tomas was waiting by the truck. He looked at my face and nodded. You saw him, yes, and you understand now why I tell the story. Even though no one believes it, I did understand, and he was right. When I got back to the States, when I tried to tell people what I'd seen, they didn't believe me. They said I'd been fooled by an old man's tall tale, that I'd hallucinated from dehydration or altitude sickness, that there was no mission, no priests, no Bierce. But I know what I saw. And now, when I teach an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge to my students, I explain it differently. I tell them it's not about a dying man's hallucination. It's about a man who found a way to escape time itself, to exist in that expanded moment between one heartbeat and the next. And sometimes, late at night when I'm grading papers, I find myself thinking about Bierce in his timeless mission, writing his unreadable stories, exploring the spaces between existence and non-existence. And I wonder, who really disappeared? The man who stepped outside of time to pursue knowledge in a place between worlds, or all of us, trapped in the forward march of time, unable to stop and truly see what lies beneath the surface of reality. Ambrose Bierce didn't die in Mexico. He didn't fall to a firing squad or succumb to illness in the desert. He found a door that most people don't even know exists, and he walked through it. And somewhere in the mountains of Chihuahua, in a mission that exists in no time and all times, he's still there, still writing, still searching for answers to questions the rest of us are too afraid to ask. The mystery isn't why he disappeared. The mystery is why he'd ever want to come back. The man who knew too much. My father drove a truck for the Teamsters for 30 years. He never talked about the 30th of July, 1975. Never mentioned Jimmy Hoffa's name if he could help it. When the TV news ran stories about searches for Hoffa's body under Giant Stadium, in a Michigan horse farm, in the foundation of some building in Detroit, my father would leave the room. It wasn't until he was dying, last year, that he finally told me why. I was there, he said, his voice barely a whisper in his hospital bed. The day Hoffa disappeared, I was there, and I saw what happened, and I've kept it secret for 49 years. This is what my father told me. The 30th of July, 1975, was a Wednesday. Hot, oppressively hot. The kind of Michigan summer heat that makes the asphalt soft and the air shimmer. My father, then 35 years old, was driving a route through Oakland County when he got a call on his CB radio. It was coded language, the kind the Teamsters used when they didn't want just anyone listening in. The message was simple. Be at the Matches Red Fox restaurant in Bloomfield Township at 2:30 p.m. Don't ask questions. Don't be late. My father knew who the message was from. Anthony Giacalone, one of the mob's main guys in Detroit. You didn't refuse when Tony Jack called. You showed up. You did what you were told, and you kept your mouth shut. That's how you stayed alive in those days. He parked his truck in the back of the restaurant's parking lot at 2:25 p.m., 5 minutes early, just like always. He could see Hoffa's green Pontiac Grandville parked conspicuously in the front lot, but Hoffa wasn't in it. He was standing near a payphone, pacing, looking at his watch, looking pissed off. My father stayed in his truck. Whatever was going down, he wanted to be able to leave fast if he needed to. At 2:45 p.m., a maroon Mercury pulled into the lot. My father recognized the car. It belonged to Tony Jack's son. But Tony Jack's foster son, Chucky O'Brien, was driving. Hoffa and Chucky went way back. Hoffa had practically raised the kid. Chucky pulled up next to Hoffa's car and rolled down the window. My father couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could see Hoffa's body language. Defensive at first, then softening. Chucky was persuasive. He was good at that. After a few minutes, Hoffa got into the Mercury, passenger side, Back seat. My father's blood went cold. Whatever Hoffa thought was happening, whatever Chucky had told him, it wasn't what was actually about to happen. Nobody gets in the back seat for a friendly ride. The Mercury left the parking lot, heading north on Telegraph Road. My father's CB crackled again. The same voice. Follow them. 2 cars back. Don't lose them. So he did. They drove for about 20 minutes, winding through suburban Detroit. The Mercury pulled into a modest neighborhood, stopped in front of a small house with drawn curtains. My father parked down the block, engine running, watching in his side mirror. 2 men got out of the front seats of the Mercury. Chucky and another guy my father didn't recognize. They opened the back door. There was a brief struggle. Hoffa knew something was wrong now, but the other guy was big, and Hoffa was 62 years old, and not the fighter he'd been in his youth. They dragged him into the house. The door closed. The Mercury sat empty in the driveway. My father sat in his truck for 10 minutes, 15, 20. His hands were shaking on the steering wheel. He knew what was happening in that house. Everyone in the Teamsters knew what happened to people who crossed the mob, who tried to regain power they'd lost, who threatened the careful balance of money and influence that kept the machine running. Hoffa had been pushing too hard to regain control of the Teamsters. He'd made enemies, powerful enemies who didn't want him back in charge of the pension fund, didn't want him asking questions about where all that money had gone, didn't want him threatening their operations in Las Vegas and everywhere else. At 3:15 p.m., the door of the house opened. The big guy came out, carrying a rolled-up carpet. My father's stomach turned. The carpet wasn't very big, about the size of a person, if you bent them the right way. They loaded the carpet into the trunk of the Mercury. Chucky got back in the driver's seat. The big guy got in passenger side. They drove away. The CB crackled again. Go home. Forget what you saw. This didn't happen. My father drove home. He kissed his wife, my mother, when she answered the door. He picked up his kids, my older brother and sister, I wasn't born yet, and held them tight. That night, he couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. He kept seeing that carpet, kept thinking about Jimmy Hoffa, who, for all his flaws, for all his mob connections, had fought for workers, had made the Teamsters into a force that companies had to respect, had gotten truck drivers, like my father, decent wages, health insurance, pensions, and now he was gone, rolled up in a carpet, taken to God knows where. The next day, the news broke. Hoffa was missing, last seen at the Marcus Red Fox. The FBI was investigating. His family was frantic. My father went to work like normal. He drove his route. He talked to other drivers. Everyone was speculating about what had happened to Hoffa, where his body might be, who might have done it. My father kept his mouth shut. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The FBI interviewed everyone connected to the case. Tony Jack, Anthony Provenzano, Chucky O'Brien, dozens of Teamsters, members, mob associates, anyone who might know something. They interviewed my father twice. He told them the truth. He'd been driving his route that day, hadn't seen anything unusual, didn't know anything about Hoffa's disappearance. He lied, and the lie ate at him. Why didn't you tell them? I asked him in that hospital room, decades later. Why didn't you tell the FBI what you saw? My father's eyes were haunted. Because I wanted to stay alive, he said. Because I had a family to protect. Because I'd gotten the message loud and clear. This didn't happen, and if I said it did, I'd end up in a carpet too. But you're telling me now. Because I'm dying anyway, he said. And because you deserve to know the truth. Not so you can do anything with it. Promise me you won't, but just so someone knows, so I'm not taking it to the grave alone. I promised. He died 3 days later, and now I'm stuck with the knowledge, with the truth that the FBI has been searching for all these years. I know what happened to Jimmy Hoffa on the 30th of July, 1975. I know he got into Chucky O'Brien's car. I know he was taken to a house somewhere in suburban Detroit. I know he never came out. But I don't know what happened to the body. My father didn't follow the Mercury after they loaded the carpet. He went home, like he was told. And in 49 years, he never found out where they took Hoffa, what they did with him. The theories are everywhere. Ground up and thrown in a swamp in Florida, buried under Giants Stadium, encased in concrete in the foundation of some building, cremated in a mafia-owned incinerator. Maybe one of those is right. Maybe none of them are. Maybe Hoffa's body is somewhere no one has ever thought to look, in a place so ordinary that it's extraordinary, hidden in plain sight for half a century. I think about calling the FBI sometimes. I think about telling them what my father told me about that house in suburban Detroit, about the mercury, about the carpet. But it's been 50 years. The house is probably gone. The people involved are mostly dead. Tony Jack died in 1993. Chucky O'Brien died in 2020. And even if I could remember the exact location, which I can't, because my father never gave me an address, what good would it do? It wouldn't bring Hoffa back. It wouldn't give his family closure. They've made their peace with never knowing. It would just put a target on my back, make me the next loose end that needs to be tied up. So I keep my mouth shut, just like my father did. But I break the silence in other ways. Small ways. Anonymous tips to journalists, carefully worded to suggest possibilities without giving away what I really know. Posts on internet forums about the Hoffa case, speculating about suburban Detroit locations, about houses that have been demolished and rebuilt in the decades since 1975. I'm leaving breadcrumbs. Not a trail leading directly to the truth, but hints, suggestions, nudges in the right direction. Maybe someday, someone will piece it together. Maybe someday, someone will search the right place, dig in the right spot, and finally solve the mystery. Or maybe not. Maybe Hoffa will stay lost forever. Maybe that's what he deserves, for getting into bed with the mob in the first place, for using pension funds to finance casino construction, for thinking he could play both sides, labor leader and mob associate, without consequences. But he was still a man, a husband, a father, a grandfather, and he deserved better than to end up in a carpet in the trunk of a car, taken to some unknown location, disposed of like trash. I dream about him sometimes. In my dreams, I'm standing in that parking lot at the Macus Red Fox, watching him get into the mercury, and I try to warn him. I try to shout, to run toward the car, to stop what's about to happen, but no sound comes out of my mouth. My feet won't move, and I just stand there, helpless, watching Jimmy Hoffa drive toward his death. Then I wake up, and I remember. It wasn't a dream. It really happened. And my father watched it happen, and did nothing, and carried that guilt for the rest of his life. Now I carry it too, the knowledge of what happened to Jimmy Hoffa, the truth about his disappearance, the secret that has consumed countless FBI man-hours, generated dozens of searches, inspired movies and books, and endless speculation. And I can't tell anyone, because the same rules that kept my father silent for 49 years keep me silent now, because the mob might be less powerful than it was in 1975, but it's not gone, because there are still people out there who don't want the truth to come out, who benefit from the mystery, who would rather Hoffa stayed lost. So here I am, sitting on one of the most famous secrets in American history, unable to share it, unable to give the world the closure it's been seeking for half a century. Sometimes I think about my father in that truck, watching events unfold that he had no power to stop. I understand now why he never talked about it, why he left the room when Hoffa's name came up, why he carried that weight alone for so long. Because once you know the truth about something like this, once you've seen something you can't unsee, you're changed. You're complicit, even if you didn't do anything. You're part of the machinery of silence that allows powerful people to get away with murder. And that's a burden that doesn't get lighter with time. It just becomes part of who you are, part of your history, your identity, your secret self that no one else can see. My father took his to the grave, almost. In the end, he couldn't quite do it. He had to tell someone, had to unburden himself just a little in those final days, and now I carry it. And maybe someday, when I'm dying, I'll tell someone too. Pass the burden along, like a cursed inheritance that can never quite be put down. Or maybe I'll take it to my grave completely. Maybe I'm weaker than my father, less able to handle the weight of knowing. Either way, Jimmy Hoffa stays lost. His body remains unfound. The mystery endures. And somewhere in suburban Detroit, if you know where to look, there's an answer. A truth that's been buried for 50 years. But you'll have to find it yourself. I've said all I can say. The rest is silence. The college student who drove into nowhere. I was the last person to see Maura Murray before she disappeared. No, I'm not the school bus driver who saw her at the crash site. I'm not the woman who called 911. I'm not the motorist who stopped to ask if she needed help. I'm the person nobody knows about. The one who was never in the police reports, never interviewed, never asked what I saw that night on Route 112 inches, Haverhill, New Hampshire, because I didn't report what I saw. And by the time I realized I should have, it was too late. It was the 9th of February, 2004. I was driving home from my shift at a hospital in Lebanon, New Hampshire, taking the back roads because I'd always preferred the quiet drive through the mountains to the highway. Around 7:30 p.m., I was on Route 112 when I saw the black Saturn in my headlights, off the road at a sharp curve, front end facing into the trees. A woman was standing outside the car, young, early 20s maybe, dark hair, athletic build. She looked shaken but unhurt. As I slowed down, she waved me off. Not frantically, not like she needed help. Just a clear gesture. Keep moving. I should have stopped anyway. I should have insisted. But I was tired from my shift, and she seemed fine. And frankly, I didn't want to get involved in whatever drunk driving situation this looked like. So, I kept driving. That decision has haunted me for 20 years. I got home around 8:15 p.m., made dinner, went to bed, and the next morning, the news was talking about a missing college student, a 1-year-old UMass Amherst nursing student named Maura Murray, whose car had been found abandoned on Route 112 the night before. Same curve, same black Saturn I'd driven past. I told myself that the police had it under control, that they'd find her, that my information wouldn't matter because the school bus driver had already reported the crash, and there were other witnesses. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, and Maura Murray stayed missing, I realized I'd made a terrible mistake, because I saw something else that night, something I didn't process at the time, something that seemed insignificant in the moment, but has become the thing I think about every single day. When I drove past Maura Murray, there was another car on the road behind me, a dark SUV, maybe a Ford Explorer or a Jeep Cherokee. It slowed down as it approached the crash site, and as I looked in my rearview mirror, I saw it pull over. I assumed it was someone stopping to help, just like the bus driver did, just like the other motorist did. I didn't think anything of it, but what if it wasn't? What if Maura Murray waved me off because she didn't want help from me, but she got into that SUV willingly? Or what if she didn't get in willingly, but was taken? I've played that scene over and over in my head for 2 decades. The black Saturn, the young woman, the dark SUV pulling over, and I've wondered, was that the moment? Was that when Maura Murray went from a missing person to a victim? I went to the police 3 weeks after she disappeared. I told them what I saw, the car, the woman, the SUV. They took my statement, asked me a few questions, and that was it. I never heard from them again. I don't know if they followed up on the SUV. I don't know if they tried to trace it. I don't know if my information meant anything at all. But I know this. Maura Murray has been missing for 20 years. No body has been found. No evidence of what happened to her has ever surfaced. It's like she vanished into thin air from that crash site on a cold February night. Except she didn't vanish into thin air. Someone knows what happened. Someone saw something. Maybe it was me, and I just don't know what I saw. Or maybe it was someone else. someone who's kept quiet all these years just like I did. I've followed the case obsessively. Read every article, listened to every podcast, watched every documentary. I've seen the theories, that she ran into the woods and succumbed to the elements, that she had a planned disappearance, that she was abducted by a passing motorist or a local predator. And I've wondered if that SUV I saw was just another Good Samaritan who stopped to help and then drove away when the bus driver showed up, or if it was something else. I've thought about reaching out to Maura's family, about telling them what I saw, about describing that SUV in as much detail as I can remember. But what would I say? I drove past your daughter the night she disappeared and I didn't stop to help. And by the way, there was a dark SUV there that might mean something or might mean nothing. How do you tell a family that's been searching for 20 years that you might have seen something, but you're not sure? And even if you did, you can't identify the vehicle or the driver or anything that would actually be helpful? So I've stayed silent. Just like I stayed silent that night. Just like I've stayed silent every day since. But Maura Murray deserves better than silence. Her family deserves answers. And even if my information leads nowhere, even if that SUV was nothing, they deserve to know that someone else was there that night. Someone else saw her. Someone else might have seen what happened next. So I'm breaking my silence now, not to the police. I already gave them my statement years ago. But to whoever's reading this, whoever's still looking for answers about what happened to Maura Murray. On the 9th of February 2004, at approximately 7:35 p.m., I drove past a black Saturn sedan at a sharp curve on Route 112 inches, Haverhill, New Hampshire. A young woman was standing outside the car. She waved me off. I kept driving. In my rearview mirror, I saw a dark-colored SUV pull over behind her. That's all I know. That's all I saw. And it might mean everything, or it might mean nothing. But for 20 years, I've carried the weight of not knowing, the weight of wondering if I could have changed everything by simply stopping my car, by insisting on helping, by not trusting that someone else would take care of it. Maura Murray is still missing. And somewhere out there, someone knows what happened to her. Maybe it's the person who was driving that SUV. Maybe it's someone else entirely. But I hope this helps. I hope that after 20 years of silence, breaking it now makes some kind of difference. Because Maura Murray deserves to be found. And her family deserves to know the truth. Even if the truth is something none of us want to hear. The girl in the Polaroid. In September 1988, I bought a pickup truck from a rest stop in Florida. It was old, beat up, but it ran, and that's all that mattered. I needed transportation, and the price was right. The previous owner left some junk in the truck bed. Old magazines, empty fast food bags, a toolbox with a broken latch. I cleaned most of it out, but there was one thing I kept. A Polaroid photograph, stuck between the seats. It showed a young woman and a boy, both bound and gagged, lying on what looked like a bed or a couch. The woman's eyes were wide with terror. Someone had written on the back of the photo, New Mexico, June 1989. I didn't think much of it at the time. I assumed it was from some stupid prank, some tasteless joke. I threw it in my glove compartment and forgot about it. Then, a year later, I saw her picture on a missing person poster. Tara Calico, age 19, missing from Belen, New Mexico since the 20th of September, 1988, almost exactly a year before I found that photo. And the woman in the Polaroid, it could have been her. Same hair, same age, same eyes. I went to the police immediately, gave them the photograph, told them where I got the truck, what, rest stop, when. They took the photo, thanked me, and I never heard back. But the photo went public. It became famous. Tara Calico's mother said she was convinced it was her daughter. The FBI analyzed it. Experts debated whether it was really Tara or just someone who looked like her. And I've wondered, for 35 years now, what did I hold in my hands? Was that really Tara Calico? And if it was, where is she now? Because the photo was dated June 1989, 9 months after she disappeared while riding her bike on Highway 47 near her home in Belen. 9 months of being held captive, if the photo was real. 9 months of hell. The truck I bought had Florida plates, but the previous owner claimed he'd driven it cross-country, from California to Florida. Had he passed through New Mexico? Had he been involved somehow, or had he just found the photo like I did, left behind by someone else? I gave the police everything I had, the bill of sale, the previous owner's name, a description of him, though I'd only met him once, but I don't know if they ever tracked him down. I don't know if they investigated the truck's history or tried to trace where it had been. And Tara Calico is still missing. Her bike was never found. Her body was never found. That Polaroid is the only potential evidence that she was still alive 9 months after she vanished. But there were other Polaroids, other photos that surfaced over the years. Some claimed to be Tara, all of them showing young women in similar situations, bound, terrified, captive. Were they all related? Were they all taken by the same person? Was there a serial abductor out there, taking these pictures as trophies? Or were they all hoaxes, cruel pranks designed to give false hope to families of missing people? I don't know. I'll never know. But I know what I saw in that photograph. I saw terror. I saw helplessness. I saw two people who didn't want to be wherever they were. And whether it was Tara Calico or someone else, someone took that photo. Someone held those people captive. Someone was out there, possibly still is, with answers to questions that have tortured families for decades. I wish I'd done more. I wish I'd gone back to that rest stop, tried to find security footage, talked to attendants, traced the truck's path more carefully. But I was 23 years old, and I didn't understand how important that photo might be. I didn't understand that I might have been holding the only evidence of a girl's fate. Tara Calico would be 55 years old now. Her mother passed away in 2002, never knowing what happened to her daughter, never having closure, never getting to say goodbye. And somewhere, that photograph exists in an evidence room. A faded Polaroid of two terrified people, bound and gagged. That might be the key to solving a 37-year-old mystery. Or might be nothing at all, but I'll never forget those eyes. The eyes of a girl who might have been Tara Calico, staring out from that photo, begging someone to help her. And I did help. I gave the police that photo, but it wasn't enough. It's never enough. The graduate who never came home. I want to tell you about the 30th of May, 2005, about Aruba and high school graduates, and how quickly joy can turn to horror. My daughter was on that graduation trip, not with Natalee Holloway's group. She went to a different high school, but they were on the island at the same time, staying in hotels just miles apart. She came home. Natalee didn't. I watched the news coverage obsessively that summer. Watched Natalee's mother, Beth Holloway, searching desperately for her daughter. Watched the Aruban police fumble the investigation. Watched suspects get arrested and released. Arrested and released. And I thanked God every day that my daughter had made it home safe. But I also knew something that never made it into the news. Something I'd told the FBI, but never told anyone else. My daughter saw Natalee that night, at Carlos and Charlie's, the bar where Natalee was last seen. She didn't know it was her at the time, just another American tourist, another blonde girl celebrating graduation. But she saw her leave, saw her get into a car with 3 local guys. The car was silver. The guy driving had dark hair, olive skin. The other 2 were in the back seat with Natalee between them. She was laughing. She didn't look distressed. She looked like a girl who'd had too much to drink and was getting a ride home from new friends. My daughter told this to the FBI, described the car, the men, the time, around 1:30 a.m., driving away from Carlos and Charlie's, heading south, and then nothing. The FBI thanked her, took her statement, and we never heard anything else. But I know what she saw. I know that Natalee Holloway got into that car willingly, thinking she was getting a safe ride back to her hotel. And I know she never made it there. The suspects, Joran van der Sloot and the Calico brothers, all told different stories. First, they said they dropped her at the hotel. Then, they said they dropped her at the beach. Then their stories changed again and again. Joran eventually confessed to killing Natalee. But in Peru, years later, while being convicted of murdering another young woman, his confession about Natalee was detailed but unverifiable. He said he pushed her. She hit her head. She died. He said he disposed of her body in the ocean. Her body has never been found. And I wonder, if my daughter had gotten into that car instead, would it have been her? Would I be the mother searching desperately for answers, appearing on news shows, begging for information? We were lucky. We got lucky because my daughter decided to share a taxi back to the hotel with her friends instead of accepting a ride from strangers. We got lucky because she was cautious enough, smart enough, sober enough to make that choice. Natalee Holloway wasn't given that chance, and somewhere in Aruba, or in the ocean off its coast, her body remains. Her family still has no closure. Her mother fought for years to find her, to bring her home, to get justice. She got a kind of justice when Joran van der Sloot was finally convicted, not for Natalee's murder, but for lying to her family about what happened, for extorting money from them with false promises of revealing where her body was. But justice isn't the same as answers, and answers aren't the same as closure. Natalee Holloway is still missing, and the truth of what happened to her that night died with Joran van der Sloot's conflicting confessions and continues to elude the family that will never stop searching. The boy who walked to the bus stop. On the 25th of May, 1979, 6-year-old Etan Patz left his apartment in Soho, New York, to walk to the school bus stop for the first time by himself. It was only 2 blocks. His mother watched from the fire escape until he reached the corner. He never made it to the bus stop. I was the superintendent of that building. I'd known the Patz family for years. Good people, nice kid, sweet, shy, loved his little sister. And I knew something that I never told anyone until years later. Something that still eats at me. There was a man in the neighborhood, a drifter who did odd jobs, stayed in the basement of a store nearby. I'd seen him watching the children, not in an obvious way, but in a way that made my skin crawl. The way he'd linger near playgrounds, near school bus stops. I'd mentioned it to a few other building managers, suggested we keep an eye on him, but none of us did anything official, didn't want to cause trouble, didn't want to accuse someone without proof. And then Etan disappeared. The man vanished the same day, just packed up and left. I told the police about him, gave them his description, the name I knew him by, probably not his real name. They looked into it, but they couldn't find him. He'd disappeared just as thoroughly as Etan had. For 33 years, I wondered if I could have prevented it, if I'd gone to the police before Etan disappeared, if I'd pushed harder for someone to investigate this man. Would that little boy still be alive? In 2012, they found him, the drifter. His name was Pedro Hernandez, and he confessed to killing Etan Patz, to strangling him in the basement of that store, to disposing of his body in a trash bag that went to a landfill. He was convicted in 2017, but Etan's body was never found. And I still carry the guilt of not doing more, not saying more, not pushing harder when I had the chance. A 6-year-old boy deserved better. His parents deserved better. And I failed them by staying silent when I should have spoken up. The girl who vanished at dawn. On the 13th of October 2018, Karlie Gusé vanished from her home in Chalfont Valley, California. She was 16 years old. The night before, she'd been at a party, acting paranoid and erratic. Her stepmother picked her up, brought her home. They stayed up late, trying to calm her down, to help her through whatever was happening. In the morning, she was gone. I'm her neighbor. I saw her that morning, around 6 a.m., walking down Highway 6 alone. She looked confused, kept looking over her shoulder. I slowed down, rolled down my window, asked if she needed a ride. She looked at me with the most terrified eyes I've ever seen and ran into the brush alongside the road. I should have followed her. I should have called someone immediately, but I thought she was just being a scared teenager, maybe high on something, maybe running away from home drama. So I kept driving to work, and by the time I got there and started having second thoughts, by the time I decided to call the police to do a welfare check, it was too late. Karlie Gusé was already gone. They searched for weeks. Helicopters, search dogs, volunteers combing the desert, found nothing. No trace, no body, no evidence of what happened to her after she ran into that brush. And I carry the knowledge that I was the last person to see her, that I had a chance to help her, to bring her home, to prevent whatever happened next, but I didn't. I drove away, and Karlie Gusé has been missing for 6 years. Her family is still searching, still hoping, still begging for answers, and I can't give them the answer they need. I can only tell them, I saw her. She was scared, and I failed her. We all failed her. These are the stories no one talks about. The witnesses who stayed silent. The people who saw something but didn't realize what they were seeing until it was too late. We're the ones who have to live with the guilt, with the knowledge that we might have made a difference, might have saved a life, might have brought someone home, but we didn't. And now all we can do is tell our stories, share what we know, and hope that somewhere, somehow, it helps bring closure to the families who are still waiting, still searching, still hoping that their missing loved ones will come home. 10 people, 10 disappearances, 10 mysteries that may never be solved. Some of these cases are centuries old. Others happened just a few years ago. But they all share one thing in common. Someone, somewhere, knows what happened. Someone saw something. Someone is keeping a secret, and the families left behind are still waiting, still hoping, still searching for answers that may never come. If any of these stories resonated with you, if you have information about any of these cases, please reach out to the authorities. Even the smallest detail could be the key to bringing someone home. Thank you for listening. Until next time, stay safe out there, and remember, sometimes the people who disappear aren't lost. Sometimes they're taken, and sometimes they simply walk away into darkness, never to return. Sleep well.